In the spectrum of technologies that we've been looking at and uh, since the last couple of days, we started with HTML. HTML has a very specific purpose that we have some data that we want to be rendered on a browser window. What we saw multiple times is that this data or this document should only contain data and it should not care anything about the styling, uh, how big it should be, what color it should be. It should all be concern of another document, another file, which is called a CSS. And over here, we are going to define the rules, and those rules they're going to dictate how big or how small that text is supposed to appear. But then there is no dynamic behavior to our website. If our user clicks on a specific button, our website does not take any action. It does not react to the user's input. It does not provide any behavior to that particular button there. It would make a lot of sense if the end user of the application can interact with the web solutions that we are creating. Now, there are two words in the industry. One is called website and the other is called web application. And the best explanation that I have gotten so far is that a website is something like Notepad. So a website is like Notepad, and it does not have any dynamic behavior. The text that you write, it just kind of sits there. But then a web application is more like a calculator, right? And then as soon as you click the sum button, the result of your input, it appears over here. Web application have dynamic behavior to them. A website is a static piece of text that you can just look at and probably extract out some information from that. With JavaScript, that plot kind of changes. JavaScript is a programming language that helps you add a dynamic behavior to the HTML elements that you have. Now, the HTML elements that we have seen, H1, H2, when we put it in a specific order in HTML file to create our website, there is the browser kind of receives that document, and the way browser renders that thing is uh, through a data structure called the DOM. Now, DOM stands for the Document Object Model. The entire structure that we have here is stored in a tree-like data structure. So HTML sits at the top. Below it we have head, and under that we have the body tag. Inside body we add header, we add main section, we add other sections, we add say navigation. Probably navigation is under header. Over here we can have different navigation elements as well, which are local to the main section here. We can have UL tag, we can have LI tag, but they are all connected through one big object, and that object is called as document. Through this document object, we have access to all the elements that we have sent inside the HTML file. So our HTML file actually gets translated to this particular data structure. JavaScript can manipulate this particular data structure. It can interact, it can receive things back and forth from this section. Right. With that said, I want to introduce you to another model. It is called the event model. What kind of activities can you do on the browser? You can click on the buttons, you can move your mouse over, you can type in the text boxes, and you can check or uncheck uh, the radio buttons and checkboxes. So there are multiple activities that you can do inside the browser, and you can interact with the website. The idea is that as you are interacting, there are events that are going to get generated, like click event, mouse moved event, mouse over event, mouse hover event, text changed event, radio button checked unchecked event, or changed event. These events, they have a specific cycle to it. Inside the browser, depending on what browser you're using, it is either going to start at the browser level, From the browser, it is going to go to the document. From document, probably it is going to go to say body. From body, it is going to go to div and probably to the button. Depending on what browser you're using, either it is going to bubble down. If the button is not doing anything about it, that event is going to be passed on to divs. And it's like button, there is a click event, but because you're not handling div, do you want to handle it? If the div doesn't handle it, it's the body that's going to handle it. If the body doesn't handle it, some other element up in the chain is going to handle it. And that is going to generate the effect that we generally get. We don't have any JavaScript. So if I add, say, a button over here and type click me, I'm going to delete the main code, the main section. And over here, I have an option called on click. And here I can write some code. The easiest JavaScript that you can write is probably an alert statement. When I do this, now when I come to this and click this, I'm going to see a pop-up showed up like this. So this is JavaScript for you. For the first time, our application has started responding to our interaction with the website. Now we can get very tricky with this and write multiple elements over here, and then we're going to do that probably today and tomorrow. And through this, we're going to add dynamic behavior to our code. While talking about JavaScript, I would want to just give me 1 second. There are a couple of questions that I would want to answer. Uh, JavaScript is a browser-specific language. It is the highest used language in the world because everybody in some way is using some form of browser and interacting with the web. JavaScript is the most executed language in the world. Uh, it does not have much connection to the Java framework, the Java programming language. Uh, the only connection that I could find is that probably they are both object-oriented and they were invented by probably almost the same team, same person. It lets you interact with the browser and provide dynamic functionality to your website. Because it is a browser-based language, you should be able to execute the code of JavaScript inside the browser as well. So we saw alert in on the button click, but there are other ways as well wherein you can interact with JavaScript. Like the alert that we put on click, I can put it over here in the console window as well. And when I do that, it is the same effect. It is just not related to that. Notice that there is something called as undefined. We're going to talk about that very shortly. I can also do some math operation like 2 plus 2 is 4. I can also do some form of interaction right here on the console. So when I do this, it is going to say hello console. Console.log syntax error. Okay, because there is a spelling mistake. So it is console, not console.log, and I'm going to say hello JavaScript this time, and I'm going to end it with single quote. So anything that I put here in single quote or double quote, it is going to get logged. Let's go ahead and try passing it something else. Let's try part today's date. It is 2nd June 2021, and it has printed something. I think it's doing some divide operation. Let's go ahead and put this back in single quote. So depending on how you pass data, JavaScript is going to take action on that, and it is going to do some math for you, or it is going to interpret the data differently, and it's going to take an appropriate action. That makes me want to talk about another concept, and that concept is data types. You can declare a variable in JavaScript like this and assign it a value, say 10, and then when I enter 10, it is printing 10 here for me. When I do I plus 5, it prints this. But JavaScript is not tied to a data type, and I can assign the same variable my name here. And then when I type I, it is going to print my name. So a variable that was storing an integer first, doing doing mathematical arithmetic operations. Now it is storing another data type altogether, and there are ways of figuring that out. So let's go ahead and put 10 back in. There is something called as type of, and then when I put I here and enter, it is going to print number. But as soon as I assign my name to it and ask for type of I, it is going to print string. So the data type of I earlier was number, but now it is string. So JavaScript is a dynamic language. Depending on the kind of value that you assign to it, it is going to take that data type, it is going to assume that data type, and it is going to behave accordingly. Now that it is string, let's try adding 5 to it. And do you see the result on screen? That it has appended 5 to a string. Let's go ahead and try something tricky. So when I put 5 in string and 10 in string and do that, it is 5, 10. But then when I do 5 plus 10, it is going to do 15. So depending on the data type, the operation is also getting affected. JavaScript has exactly 5 or 6 data types. We have seen 2 already, number and string. The other data type I remember is undefined. So undefined is a data type in JavaScript. When you declare a variable but don't assign a value to it, that's when that variable is undefined. So if I come here and type of, it's going to give you undefined. But there is another way. If you have no plans of assigning a value to a data type, you can assign a null value to it. And when you do that and look at type of A now, it is going to say object. So null is a data type, and object is also a data type. It is the null value is has dual intention in JavaScript, and it is a very complex concept to understand because it doesn't care about, even in statically typed languages, it doesn't care about type safety. So you can assign null to a string object, a person object, and an account object, and it is the same thing on the right hand side. So with that, we have already seen a couple of data types that are present inside JavaScript, and we have seen the dynamic behavior of the language. Another thing that I would so I've pressed Control L and Control L clears screen. Another thing that JavaScript can do is it can help you define a function, and function can take variables. Inside this function, if I do console.log and print type X, don't expect that it is going to get logged right away. I'm going to probably give this function a name called logger, and I'm going to hit enter. Notice that it is again giving us undefined because there is a variable that probably did not get initialized. But then if I go to logger and if I pass my name here this time, it is going to log it, which means that this string is getting assigned to this particular variable here, and through this function it is logging it on the screen. So anything that you put here, it is going to do that work. Another reason that I am explaining it to you over here in console is to communicate the point that JavaScript is a console-based programming language. And in these languages, they can run in console as well. But then anything and everything that we have done here, we can also do it probably inside this. So if I now come here and type console.log and say Zia, and if I go to this and click, notice what happens in console. It is printing the data that I'm passing here. Okay, but last 2 days we have made this point very clear that HTML has a single purpose, and that purpose is for passing data to the browser, and then such behavior is not encouraged. I don't want to put anything over here. I would rather, so I'm going to get rid of this styling here. I would rather put the JavaScript that I had kept there inside the script tag over here, and I'm going to type console.log script inside head. When I save it, and now if I refresh this page, notice that it's printing script inside head, because this code got executed. Make sense? But did we do inline styling over here like this? You were like, no, 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 we would want a different file for this particular content, and we would want to disconnect any association between this and any association that we have between the HTML and that thing. But before that, let me go ahead and create another function here, and I'm going to call it clicked, or probably button clicked, like this. And I'm going to type console.log button click handler inside function. Now the way to associate that with this particular button is on click, and then you provide the function name over here like this with the parentheses. Now if I come here and run it and click on this button, so button click handler inside function. I could have gone creative with this. Inside I wanted to say script section, but even this is not encouraged. You don't want to put these things inside the script here, so I'm going to cut out of this function, and I'm going to add a JavaScript file. I can call it demo.js, or I generally call my first JavaScript file as app.js. There is another app.js inside this folder. I don't know what folder I'm in. I'm in D2. I'm going to come and add app.js here, and the function that I had cut, I'm going to paste it here. Now to link the JavaScript file with this, I cannot use the link attribute. Alright, so this is an exception for JavaScript, and be very, very careful. Some people try to use link and provide relationship as JavaScript. That doesn't work. You come here and you specify the src attribute, and over here you type app.js. So this is how these two things are going to get linked. And now let me show you something else. I'm going to delete this function for now. I'm going to say app.js. Now I know that this console.log is going to work, because if I come and paste it here, it prints something. I'm going to refresh, and it has printed this thing. Now if I bring the function definition back, button click handler inside JS file, I'm going to put this comment, and the button click function name, I'm going to put it inside the on click. And now if I refresh this, so I think there was some error with the page. Now if I click this, it is still going to associate. So we can do JavaScript coding right in line, right next to the event handler. We can probably create a script tag, or we can move these tags to a separate file over here, and they are all going to work. All right, so it is already 10 o'clock. Let's end the session for today, and we're going to continue the JavaScript part little later tomorrow. All right. Anybody?